Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Sam. I'd like to welcome you to my Eye Clarity podcast. This is a show that offers cutting-edge information on how to improve your vision and overall wellness through holistic methods. I so appreciate you spending part of your day with me. If you have questions, you can send them to hello@drsamberne.com. Now, to the latest Eye Clarity episode. Hey folks, it's Dr. Sam, and I'd like to welcome you to another Eye Clarity podcast. So we have a very interesting guest today, one of my colleagues. I haven't talked to her in quite a while. Her name is Dr. Lynn F. Hellerstein, and let me give you a little background about her. She is a pioneer in the field of vision therapy, and she's an award-winning author. She's written several books, and she has a new book out. I want to talk about that. And the book is entitled Expand Your Vision: How to Gain Clarity, Courage, and Confidence. So Dr. Hellerstein is really an amazing optometrist. She is, she's a leader in the field of behavioral optometry, developmental optometry, and I certainly have had a great deal of respect watching her over the years in her career. She has utilized vision therapy for both children and adults with learning-related vision problems, brain injuries, as well as helping athletes enhance their performance. At this point, she has helped thousands of people improve their vision and enhance their lives. She's an international bestseller, and I'm so excited to have her on. Dr. Hellerstein, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sam, and it's so great to be with you. It has been ages since we've actually talked, so it's delightful, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I want to introduce my community to you. They're so hungry for another approach in eye care. I mean, I feel like I'm a voice out there, especially in social media, where, you know, it's great to be able to bring on other holistic optometrists and have them speak about their perspectives. So let's start with this. How did you get into the field? What was your starting point?
Sure. Well, my dad was an optometrist, and actually my grandfather was an optometrist in the early days, where jewelers doubled up and took a night course and learned how to prescribe glasses. Yeah. So I'm really a third generation optometrist in my family. Also the third woman in the state of Colorado to be an optometrist. So, you know, I feel like I'm a pioneer back then, where, you know, I was one of very few women in my class of optometry. But I got really interested. I've always been interested in medicine. And I was on the course to go to med school and be a pediatrician. And at the last minute, I decided I wanted a family. I didn't really want all those night calls as well. And so I switched to optometry. And the reason I was really interested in that field is because of my own vision problems. It's usually where it starts. I could see great, didn't need glasses for seeing. But when it came to reading, and I knew how to read, I had all the vocabulary to read, but very early on, you know, second grade, I'd start reading, and before you knew it, my eyelids got heavy and the print started blurring and I was sound asleep. And it didn't make any difference what I was reading, how long I was reading, just within a few minutes. I just couldn't stay on the book very long. So I spent all my years in school avoiding reading. And luckily, I had other skills to compensate. I listened well, I organized well. I hate to say you can get through a lot of years not reading very much. You know, I went through 8 years of college, doing everything I could not to read, yet still excel in school. So it's been a struggle all along. And it wasn't until I finally went to optometry school that I understood what was going on with myself, and had focus problems, needed vision therapy. So my passion was how can I reach more people that even if they see well, aren't functionally doing very well? And that's how I started.
And you bring up a great point about the functional aspects of vision, because as as we know that in a regular eye exam, it's just 20/20 eyesight and eye health, and you're out the door. And you've devoted your career to helping people improve their learning. So I want to get into this topic called visualization, because I know you're an expert in this. And so tell me about how you got interested in it, how you use it. I know my community is very interested in it as a visual skill. So tell me about visualization.
So when I started my vision therapy practice, teachers found me out, and this was back in the late 70s, because they had all these kids that weren't reading well and poor handwriting or clumsy at sports, and they started sending me patients. And I got all the best equipment I could to help them learn to focus and coordinate their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the kids they sent me wouldn't sit in the chair long enough to do any of the activities that we had learned in optometry school. And so I had to find some other ways to work with these kiddos to start, I couldn't improve their visual system if I couldn't even get them to focus their body and be able to sit still and look at all these things.
Of course.
So it set me on the course of starting to work with other professionals. And early on, my sister, who's an occupational therapist, joined my practice. I worked with physical therapists. They would send me patients because they didn't know what to do with them after a stroke or brain injury or reading. And so I started very early in my career working with other professionals. And some of the schools started asking me to come in and give them in services and teach them more about vision. And one school said, we want you to give us a seminar on visual perception. And I'm like, visual perception? Well, we learned that once in school. What do I do with that?
Right.
And it was through then extra study outside of my schooling that I started really learning how eye, mind, brain, body works together, and was looking at my colleagues and learning from them, knowing my specialty in vision, and eyes lead the body, but how do we work together? And so that again started me on a whole new educational course of understanding this eye, mind, body connection. As I got further along, again, it was my community said, well, this is great. Can you tell us more about, and they're the ones who brought visualization in my life, and that used to be the voodoo. In fact, I remember teachers could almost lose their job if they mentioned the word because it sounded like mind control.
It is true.
Yep.
It is true. Yeah.
I remember I had a little patient, he came to me and I was teaching him how to visualize for spelling. We have some great strategies, how to see the words in your head, write from your pictures. And when I told the mother for home therapy, I said, we're going to use this great strategy on visualizing for spelling. She said, I'm pulling them out of your program.
Oh my.
I go, well, why? It's very effective. She says, you are not allowed to do any mind control with my child. I said, well, I'm sorry if I've offended you. How about if we just see the words in our head? Would that be okay? She said, oh yeah, that's fine. So that started me on the course of really looking at vision on the inside as well as vision on the outside. That's how I describe it. Here we're teaching people how to see clear, not just clear, focus, using my eyes together, appreciating space and periphery and all these other parameters of vision. And I started to look inward as well in our imagination and utilizing visualization. So that started me on the track of learning about visualization for my practice. Then it really accelerated when I had a medical crisis in 2002, which totally changed my life, and started working with a psychotherapist who utilized visualization as a treatment modality in my stress and anxiety. And it was just so familiar what she was doing, because all the kind of visual languaging of what we've done in vision therapy, but just looking deeper inside. So that's where it's really set me on course to help people improve their vision, both externally as well as internally. And then, of
Yeah,
course,
thank you
through
for
all my
that.
study, and
Yeah,
people like you, people like Dr. Joe Dispenza and Jack Canfield
sure,
and all these big leaders now in the field,
sure.
it was so familiar. I came to that understanding really through my external vision work, but it's
Mhm.
so integrated, and to where I find the power of learning,
Sure.
reducing stress, and creating your life.
Yeah, I mean, in my studies, I have found that visualization helps improve my serotonin production, my serotonin and dopamine, and how that affects my mood and my energy and my ability to retain what I'm learning. So we're here with Dr. Lynn Hellerstein. She is a behavioral optometrist, vision therapist, best-selling author. She has a new book out called Expand Your Vision: How to Gain Clarity, Courage, and Confidence, a bestseller on Amazon. And I'd like to move now to burnout. This is a big issue. Even since COVID, it's a different kind of burnout, but people on Zoom calls all day, kids, online schools. How are you navigating, and helping people eliminate these spiral burnouts, which we know it zaps our progress and our experiencing? And I know you use visualization as one of the recovery strategies. Share with our audience how you help people with this.
Sure. Again, it starts with my personal journey. Everything I utilize with my patients, and a lot of that is what they've taught me, of course, but I've experienced myself. And, in 2002 is when I had a major burnout because of my health crisis. I actually had a tumor in my colon, major surgery. Luckily, I did not need chemo because we found it very, very early. But what happened was I became allergic to all foods,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
couldn't eat. I was working with alternative care folks on this. I couldn't digest food, and it became really kind of representative of my life. I couldn't digest life. My whole life was being described through digestive terms. It's a bunch of
Right.
and I was burned out from the office. Before this crisis, I kept having dreams that I was on this fast freight train speeding out of control, ready to crash. And I kept thinking, how do I get off the train? How do I stop the train? And I didn't know how to. And I believe the universe stopped it for me. And that's when I was truly knocked down. I couldn't work for months. And even though it was a digestive issue and I had surgery on my colon, I felt like I was a brain injury patient. I couldn't think clearly, couldn't go back to work. And I knew there had to be more to life. No longer were the labels of doctor and mother and speaker and writer. None of that made any difference. This burnout threw me in the crisis of who am I and what is my purpose of life. And it was on that journey that I met this psychologist who was not a traditional psychologist. She had thrown all that work out, and she was creating her own body of work called RIM, Releasing Inner Memories. And it involved all this visualization in the body. And so that is where I started learning the power of visualization, but that it wasn't in isolation. At that time, I changed my diet. Exercise became really important, functional medicine and supplements. It was really a whole basket of goodies that I was utilizing to recover my own health. And as I recovered more and more, visualization, meditation, yoga, all those things became part of my life. So I don't believe there's I wish there was a simple pill. There isn't. It's what you talk about on this podcast all the time. It's a multi-sensory, multi-group of activities to be well.
Sure. Of course. And, when we talk about, what you've been through, I've certainly had health challenges as well. we take a look at what's going on a cellular level. I remember one of my mentors who's actually practiced in Colorado, who you knew him quite well, Dr. Al Sutton. And I remember being in his office in Miami Beach, and Dr. Sutton said, one of the things that I like to do is explore what's going on in the biochemistry of a person and support that, and then apply visualization, vision therapy, and so on. And what you're speaking about is the holistic model, the integrative medicine model. And by you going through it, and I went through it also, you can help your patients so much more. And in this book you wrote, which I love, you bring in some case histories, and there are a few of them that I was really inspired by. One was Trevor, who suffered a brain injury. Do you remember him? Can you speak a little bit about what you did for him?
Trevor was one of my favorite patients, and I've had the opportunity to work with him over 30 years. He was referred to me when he was like either 7 or 9 years old. He suffered a very severe brain injury from a motorbike accident. And he was one of those patients, they didn't know if he'd live, then they didn't know if he'd ever walk, talk, be functional. And Trevor defied all odds from day one, but he had to relearn all his skills. And he ended up with severe visual problems where he lost about 2/3 of his visual field, meaning most of his lower visual field and part of one side were destroyed and damaged. So if he would look straight ahead, he wouldn't notice things on the ground, or he'd bump into things on the right side. So he had a severe field loss, he had double vision, and those are just the visual problems. He had all the other motor and language and other issues. So I saw him when, he was just getting back to school, which they wondered if he would ever read, even, finish school. Well, what they didn't know about Trevor is he was a kiddo who had been identified as being gifted. So he was one very smart little kid who was also very motivated. And he came into therapy. We worked with him, probably 9 months to a year. By the time we were done, he was caught up in school. He was advanced in school. And his favorite sport to play was baseball, which was so shocking to me because I guess he was a great pitcher so that nobody would hit the ball back to him, because if he got a line drive, he would have no awareness that the ball was coming close to him. And he played all through high school, if you can imagine that. So Trevor, again, defied all odds. He graduated high school at the top of his class. He went to the Colorado School of the Mines, which is a very high-level engineering school. The only problem he had was doing the actual experiments with dangerous chemicals like sulfuric acid. He could not really judge space very well, and to pour chemicals from one beaker to another was a challenge. And so he'd always have to work and advocate to get support, that he could get somebody, he could tell them how to do the experiment, but not do the experiment himself. He never was able to drive because of his visual field loss, yet he performed at everything else that the engineering school wanted to do. He then was accepted at medical school and flew through medical school, being able to do everything they needed him to do, scored very high, and therefore landed a very high level dermatology residency, which again, with all the problems he had, the only way he could land it, he could pass all those kinds of labs and perform quite well. So Trevor's now off to med school. I get a call in his first year of residency. It's been only 2 or 3 months, and we're following along for, glasses, contacts, general health. And I get a call, and I can hardly hear him on the phone. And he goes, "Dr. H, I need your help." And I'm like, Trevor, is that you? And Trevor was in the hospital. Because he couldn't drive, he walked everywhere. And he was walking across the crosswalk with the light. Some young kid texting while he was driving ran the light, hit him, and he suffered a second brain injury.
Oh my goodness.
I was just devastated, as he was. He took, time again in the hospital to recover. As soon as he was out, he came back to the office, and all of his visual problems got much worse. He had double vision, couldn't read. He also suffered hand injuries, ear injuries, a whole bunch of new injuries. And he was bound and determined to get back to medical school. And it's a very sad story in that the medical school didn't understand the brain injury, in that he needed time to rest. He was so fatigued, and the schedules of med students is crazy. And so it was a battle for him to get back. And it's a long story as we continue, but the really important part of the story is they ended up sending him for another eye exam for a second opinion. And the doctor did a visual field and saw the fields and said, "You can't go to medical school. You've lost too much of your field of vision." And Trevor brought the fields in one day and he says, "I'm done." I said, "Well, Trevor, let me show you your fields from 20 years ago. They're the same." He said, "Well, the doctor said I can't do this." I said, "Well, what have you been doing for 20 years?" So Trevor, in his mind, always visualized himself as a doctor. And it changed in the matter of an hour when one doctor said to him, "You can't do it." And that's the power of our language.
Sure.
And as soon as I showed him the fields, he goes, "Well, they haven't changed." I go, "No." So that means I still could do this? I said, "Trevor, you've proven yourself. You can do it with these terrible visual fields." But it just showed you how powerful words are and the power of his visualization overcoming the words. And so he continues on his journey throughout all of this.
Yeah, very, very inspiring. And it's great to have another doctor talk about these kind of success stories. I mean, I talk about them all the time, but there's power in numbers. So when a bunch of us get together and say, "Yeah, this is really happening," and what you were able to do for him is show him what's really going on. And it's just a really it's very inspiring. So we're coming down near to the end of our interview. I'm here with Dr. Lynn Hellerstein. She's a pioneer in the field of vision therapy, behavioral optometry. She's a best-selling author. She has a new book out called Expand Your Vision: How to Gain Clarity, Courage, and Confidence. It's a really, really amazing book. And if you're interested in my content, you need to get this book. So Lynn, how can people, first of all, how can they order the book, and how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Best way to get in touch with me, you can check out my website, lynnhellerstein.com. And I think they'll be in the show notes. Is that correct, Sam? Or?
Yes, I will be putting it in the show notes.
Because the spelling's a little tricky. Yeah. The book's available on Amazon. So all my books are available on Amazon, and then social media on I don't do Twitter much, but Facebook, Instagram.
Great. Yeah. So everybody, I want you to follow Dr. Hellerstein on Facebook and Instagram, buy her book. And you're also, maybe you'll be doing some workshops. I hope so, because people need to learn what you're teaching them. You're a fabulous teacher and educator, as well as a doctor. So, I hope you put those up on your website so that people can hook in with you. So I want to thank you so much for your generosity of spirit, your inspiration for thousands of people. And thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from the Eye Clarity podcast show today. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. See you here next time.